Have you ever wondered how successful architecture, engineering, and construction companies scale their business?
Or have you ever wanted guidance on how to get more growth, wealth, and freedom from your AEC company?
Well, then you're in luck. Hi, I'm Will Forat.
And I'm Justin Nagel, and we're your podcast hosts.
We interview successful AEC business leaders to learn how they use people, process, and technology to scale their businesses.
So sit back and get ready to learn from the industry's best. This is Building Scale.
Hey listeners, it's Will here. Our mission is to help the AEC industry protect itself by making technology easy. If you've ever listened to our show, then you know that the three pillars of scaling a business are people, process, and technology. So if you suspect technology is your weak link, then book a call with us to see where we can help maximize your company's IT and cybersecurity strategy. Just go to buildingscale.net/help.
Today on the show, we have the founders of Parspec, Forest and Pratyus. Forrest developed a passion for housing affordability and sustainability at a young age, which led him to his career in building engineering at Arup in London. He later pursued a PhD in computational design optimization at Stanford before joining the research and teaching team there in 2013. Forrest went on to lead software and design automation at Katera, a technology-driven off-site construction company, before co-founding Parspec in 2021. Pratyus spent his career developing AI and automation applications for the construction industry before founding Parspec with Forest here. He's excited to be part of the construction's digital revolution and help to improve the speed and transparency of the construction supply chain. Pratyus holds a master's degree from Stanford University and BTech in EE from IIT-R is what that says. So there's a lot of letters there that go into it. But with all that said, welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Justin. Will, great to be here.
So I said this in our pre-interview. If I was a doctor, I would force people to call me doctor. So Forrest, you have way less ego than I do. I'm going to say that right now, just off the bat. That would be, I would not respond to anyone, even like my wife. It'd be like, oh no, it's doctor husband. Like that's what it would be that.
I think I'd be looking over my shoulder for Dr. Flager too. I think Forrest is just fine with me.
So awesome. So tell us about, I said some things, but tell us about your origin story, both of you. One, how this all came about, and then how did you connect, and then tell us about Parspec.
Absolutely, yeah. So origin story does go back to Stanford. We were actually researching basically how we could use computing to look through many design options, right? Help to generate the options and evaluate them. Pratyus and I worked together in a lab there, and one of the challenges we always faced was just finding the product information. What are the different materials and products that go into buildings? What are their technical attributes, right? That you need to assess performance. What do they cost? How long does it take to get them? Sort of like basic information that I think most people that would use e-commerce today, right, would expect to know about the products and materials. A little bit harder to come by in the construction industry. And so Parspec is really aimed at providing better information about products. And there's some technology behind how we do that, but that's fundamentally, how it came together in terms of the vision of the company. Pratyus had some ideas around the technology, maybe behind how we can structure that information. I'll let him share a little bit more about how that tech came about.
Yeah, thank you, Forrest. So yeah, it's part of the research group that Forrest was leading, and our job really was to find ways to optimize the cost and energy consumption of buildings, taking into account various parameters. So we began with steel as a component of the building to better understand and optimize the usage of, and it's interesting how during this process we've realized that the overall as an industry, the construction industry is really behind when it comes to having a digital database or some digital background where researchers can take certain things as granted and then build applications and algorithms on top of it. And so we started at a pretty rudimentary level, but soon we realized that in order to do the best job possible to optimize the full building, you need to create that foundation, right? And that's what got me and Forrest really excited, and that's what Parspec is all about. The vision of Parspec, that eventually there could be a way more digitized and optimized and AI-fed construction procurement supply chain, and there's lots of technology in the back end to power this, mostly around AI. And just look forward to some pretty interesting disruption here.
That's like the epitome of the tech story, right? It's like, hey, let me find this thing that's way behind that nobody's paying attention to, and then let me just dump in technology, or like how can I grasp the data and then use that to advantage. So good on you two of seeing the need, and then obviously building a company to help people. Speaking of, 2021 was not that long ago. You were like 7 people, and now you're 33 people. So growth has been a big part of the last 2 years. Tell us about that. Tell us about some of the ups, the downs, the struggles, roadblocks, things that you've seen that have worked really well, and things that maybe haven't worked as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think, kind of the fundamental underpinnings are like how the team is structured, right? As it grows, we are a geographically distributed team, but I would say we have 2 centers of excellence. So after Stanford, Pratyush moved back to India. He's currently living in Bangalore. I'm here in the Bay Area. And we've tried to co-locate teams around those 2 geographies, even though those 2 geographies are halfway around the world. We've got a 12.5-hour time difference. So both of those offices are hybrid. And I think in terms of, I'll just speak on the US side, I'll let Pratyush take the team members in India. Obviously having a solid foundation there is very important to sort of spread the culture of the company and the key ideals. I was fortunate enough to have a few, I think the 3 of the first 4 team members that I brought on board were people that I had worked with at the past, most of them at Katera, which is another sort of startup that was pretty dynamic, right? So you have a feel for who's capable of operating in like a high ambiguity, different everyday type environment. So I think that was very fortunate. And then obviously, had a great early fit with Zach Mix, who's our account executive, who didn't have that background but knows the lighting and electrical space really well and brought that expertise. So that was the sort of like early DNA, and then we've added from there. We can talk a little bit about the collaboration, but before I do that, I'll let Pratyush talk a little bit about the growth story on the India side.
Yeah, thanks, Forrest. So on the India side as well, it's been fairly similar. So I more relied on my personal network and secondary network to get the few early engineering leads in the team. And it really, I always knew that finding people, the right folks to build a team, especially in the beginning, is the most important thing. But that just got more and more, founded into what I believe is supposed to be, the way to form a successful company, because ideas are easier to change than people, right? Like tomorrow I can have a pivot, but I probably will have the same team. But you want to make sure that the team is still motivated enough and equipped and also driven to make sure that, the company sees through the pivot, right? Or the various challenges that come along the way. So I would say I was fortunate enough to get close to a lot of really talented people in the beginning. And then once you have 3 or 4 to set the base up, then from there it's easier to expand because everybody pitches in with their network as well. It's a positive network effect. And for us, from day one, talent has been clearly the higher priority than co-location. So even though we have an office in Bangalore, a lot of our people are scattered across India in different cities, merely because they are just better suited for the role and they have the right mindset and the right motivation to make this happen join an early stage startup and then go through all the challenges together and see through the end, see through to the end. So we have a few folks in Bangalore. There's clearly a difference in having people in the same office versus not. But and to your point earlier about your question about what have been the challenges, I would say that's definitely has been one of them, to have a clear, effective communication across teams that are situated in different cities of not just the same country, but also completely opposite, right, on the face of the earth. So like between India and US, there's a huge time difference as well. So that has been definitely one of the challenges, but I think we are handling that well, purely because everybody is individually motivated enough, right, to make sure that we are going towards the goal.
Got it. So before we get into full collaboration, so hybrid work that's a big thing. Like that's a huge topic. Should people be in the office, not in the office? Should there be a hybrid version of that? How 2021, certainly in California, I have to imagine people were at home. Like I have to, think that that's probably the case. So how did that work, going from people are not in an office and now people are going to an office at least some of the time? And same thing in India, I suppose.
Yeah, we moved into an office in October of 21. Before that, we were fully remote. I mean, I want to come back to a point you mentioned earlier about, like kind of construction being behind, right? And I think it plays into the team culture a little bit too, right? Which is, I mean, my belief on one of the reasons behind that is you have some very specific workflows, right, and processes that are unique to construction. And because of that, a lot of sort of like more generalist tech, right, for say marketplaces or procurement may not be relevant, right, for this particular industry. And so I think fundamentally that's because the people that really understand the domain are not typically the same people that really understand what's possible, say, with AI, right, and or are capable of building those systems. And that's true for our team as well, right? We have people coming with decades of experience in construction and the same on the AI side. And so when we think of what makes an effective team, a lot of that is around how do we share that knowledge, right, and bring both sides up. And so fundamentally, I think the answer is you have to make that a priority, right? People are coming from very different places and you have to allow the space to sort of learn about each respective area. And that is both like on a personal level, right? We have a cultural differences and backgrounds, people growing up in India versus growing up in the US, as well as the technical. And so we've very consciously tried to set up those opportunities, right, for people just to talk about, the industry that they came from or their personal backgrounds, just to facilitate that communication, right, which is essential to building a good product or build a good company that really depends on a very multidisciplinary team. And so I guess my philosophy is like that's one of the reasons why sometimes the most advanced tech hasn't made it into the industry. It's because there hasn't been enough of that communication of the experts in those two areas. And so yeah, we're tackling that at a company level just as much as we are, I think, at an industry level, which is fun too. I mean, I think a lot of people enjoy really learning about something that they have no background in, right, and just figuring out really how much is there, right, to learn about. And so that's been a learning experience for me, and I think a lot of the team.
Not to mention, you've got cultural differences of, are you playing cricket or baseball, or is it soccer or football, right?
Yeah.
And which football are we actually talking about here? So no, there's a lot of cultural differences. I can see why halfway around the world, you've got, I mean, even to sprout innovation, you have to step a mile in the other person's shoes in order to be able to then connect the two dots, right? Construction versus technology, especially with what you guys are doing. If the other side doesn't know, essentially left hand and right hand don't know what they're doing, you're not gonna be able to create what you're creating right now. Yeah. So very cool that you're able to do that. I think the industry itself could probably learn a thing or two about how you guys are doing things.
So how does so because of the time difference, so like hybrid, so that in itself, it has its challenges, but now you add in half a day or 12 and a half hours. How does that collaboration work? Like, some people are sleeping when other people are working. It's almost like you're a 24-hour shop at this point, just simply based on the location of where you're at. So how do you get that camaraderie and collaboration when it comes to the two, hubs of excellence is what I believe you called it for us, which I love. I love that term. First time I heard it, so all about it. So how do you get that collaboration to work?
Yeah, well, I think there's a heightened sort of importance to those times where it's, I would say, reasonable to meet, right? In our case, it's early morning or, sort of like mid evening, depending on how late of a night owl you are. And so, you have these windows where it's possible to collaborate. And then there's like what is sustainable, right? So for example, switching between early morning and late evening, I think is difficult for most people, right? So the people that really need to collaborate closely, I think we pick one of those two, right? So, a few nights a week or a couple days a week, right? One person is, it's late evening, early morning. And I think you have to come up with a schedule pretty quickly that is sustainable, right? Where people are not going to feel like they're not able to live their lives, right? Because they have to meet outside of typical working hours to collaborate. So that's one element of it, just the practical of like, what do we think is reasonable and how do people like to work? Certain people are morning or evening. It's not going to work for everyone, but coming to that consensus where people are really bought in. And the second is you have to make it fun, right? Like where it's not always, because it is outside of working hours, so try to do a little bit of social, a little bit of like fun activities during those times as well. I mean, I guess we were talking earlier around like, a virtual happy hour, which is I think a lot of companies use. A lot of people maybe don't know what that means or haven't seen that work if it's totally like unprogrammed time. The nice thing about 12 and a half hours is the drinks are very different. So you have a point of conversation around, mimosas versus, whiskey on the rocks.
Yep.
But we're also like trying to schedule that time as well, right? Where you have like an activity to do, you're playing a game. And so that I would say makes it a little bit less awkward, particularly in the beginning, right? When just like free flowing conversation may just seem a little bit difficult, right? To start things up. So just investing the time, right? To really like plan out the activities and try to find something that everyone would enjoy.
Yeah, to build up on that, I mean that's absolutely what we really value, right? Like the midway times, early mornings, and sort of mid to late evenings. But even after that, the reality is that most of the day there isn't too much live coordination because of the 12-hour gap. So what helps a lot there is just structuring around what each person is responsible for, like clearly laying out the goals and whether they are long-term goals or short-term goals. And short-term can be like bi-weekly, sprint-wise, or it could be even a couple of days or things only meant for that single day. And what that helps with is even if the other part of other half of the team is not available, the first half is not blocked, right? They know what to do, and we can wait until the other half of the team is available to carry on for the remainder of the work. So it does mean that some meticulous planning is required, more meticulous than what I would think is an average case where everybody is available in the same office. But there's a way to make it happen, and there are advantages to doing that. I mean, just because we do value meticulous planning because of the time difference and various other and a few other factors, it helps us keep our metrics in check, right? And it helps us keep our goals aligned and make sure that we're not missing out on too many deadlines and all those things. Yeah. On the second one part that you mentioned earlier is that we are a 24-hour shop. We actually have seen advantages of that because it's a software. So during the US work time, if somebody reports a critical bug in the application, By the time everybody goes to sleep in the US, the engineering team wakes up in India and they have a chance to fix it. So many times it's possible that you report something in the evening of a Wednesday in the US, and by Thursday morning it's already resolved. So sometimes that works to our advantage as well. Yeah.
Nice. What about the two of you? Like, are you, obviously you have to do some form of, planning, and I know, Pratyus, you're currently in the Bay Area right now, so maybe this is when this time is happening for Q3. But those conversations usually go a little bit longer in generality, right? So it's like, it's one thing to have an hour, 2 hours, have a night/morning meeting. It's different when it's like, hey, we need to like really put in like 6 to 8 hours together. Like that seems like there has to be a different setup there. What does that look like when it comes to more strategic planning?
Yeah, it's a good question. We haven't managed the day-long virtual call yet, although we have had sessions for 2-3 hours at a time, right? That sometimes we'll go into the middle of the night. Producer will probably laugh at me, but I have a 7-month-old daughter now, so like the time scales get a little bit, like what time of day it is gets a little bit jumbled. So whether it's 3 in the morning or 3 in the afternoon, sometimes doesn't really matter to me. So that makes it a little bit easier.
The advantages of not
yeah.
sleeping with a child. Okay, now I'm hearing it. They didn't tell me about these advantages when I had my son, so I was unaware. So
that's all how you
happy accident. It. One, congratulations, because that's awesome. Yeah. And two, happy accident that you get weird times. You're just awake at weird times.
Yeah. I mean, but I think the reality is like you're gonna have to moderate those sessions, right? You can't have the same like extended intensity of like an offsite planning where you're kind of like at it for 8 hours. Like I don't think, at least like for Pratyus and I, that hasn't worked. So you might have to split that over several days if you're not able to make it there in person. And we're trying to make the effort to find those times to spend some time with the rest of the team, not just ourselves, around those offsites or planning sessions. But the reality is we also have him and I have these planning sessions, but it's usually just a couple hours at a time.
Got it.
Yeah.
Speaking of planning, so goals, what you're still a very young company, just talking about a little over 2 years old. So like what are those goals? Like what timelines do you put goals in? And then what are the structure, or what are those goals coming here for 2023, 2024 and beyond?
Yeah, well, I'll talk about process first, right? And then maybe get into the specific goals.
Sure.
I mean, I think you sort of have the sort of vision, mission level goals, right? Even with a young company, I think it's helpful to revisit those occasionally, right? As the company learns and grows. But I would say those are probably on like the annual sort of time frame that we really like seriously look at those, right? And then in terms of actual like the metrics that drive the success of the business, those are typically set quarterly and reviewed monthly at sort of like a company-wide level. So that's sort of the cadence. The goals that we're looking at, and we haven't talked too much about the products that Parspec has in market and plans to have, but our customers are sales agents and distributors of lighting and electrical products today. So we talked earlier about like the big vision of Parspec and the data that we hope to bring to the industry. We're starting with lighting and electrical products. The value we offer today is around one very specific part of the process, which is putting together what's called a product submittal, which is essentially a set of documentation, a data sheet essentially associated with every product that is planned to be bought, right? So that you can get approval from the design team that those products meet the requirements. That's a tedious process today. Sellers are typically going to manufacturer websites, downloading information, marking that up with configuration information, and then sending that off as a book to their customer. We're automating that part of it, right? And so where we go from here, it also is relying on the data, but expanding the offering vertically, right? So we're helping our customers now, or planning to release this shortly in October, the ability to, once they have a set of requirements, we can automatically identify the products from manufacturers they work with that meet those requirements programmatically, which helps them deliver a quote or recommendations to their customer much more quickly, right? So think of reducing the time to quote by 50 to 80%. That's fundamental for these businesses, right? And then we can support the downstream process, which are submittals, operation and maintenance packages, right? So I would say the goals for this year are expanding the product offering to be able to help our customers with those aspects of their workflow.
That's huge. Like,
Yeah.
so hold on, like 60%, especially when it takes hours, days, or even weeks to go through the entire quoting process, right? Depending on how large the project is, that's humongous. And then keeping up to date with all the pricing from all the different manufacturers, there's like a lot of problems that you're solving there. So being able to have almost a marketplace of where you can get all of that in one place is massive. Like the time spent, I'm sure that's a brain cramp just trying to go through like the different types of parts. Holy cow. Like I hope people are hearing this. This is huge.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really just recognizing the value that our customers had, right? If you study what's involved in the quoting and submittal process, as you mentioned, a lot of that is like you're looking for information, right? You're like trying to find data sheets, or you're trying to find products that meet requirements, or you're looking at pricing. And I think that's, those kind of like low hanging, I would say like less skilled tasks or something that, we're trying to leverage technology to solve. We want those, salespeople or product managers to be able to spend time with their customers, engage with them, figure out what their needs are, right? Not like in back of house things like looking up product information, emailing manufacturers to try to get pricing, like those things that probably aren't the most fun things to do, but take a lot of time in today's process.
Mm-hmm. I mean, to add to that, the reality is that, as you said, Will, that there's just so many product options available, and it's only increasing, right? Like every day, new manufacturers are coming in, new technologies are coming in. There are new laws, right, like that force products to be more energy efficient. So there are various factors due to which new options are available. And without having a comprehensive data set that makes it easy to compare different products, the reality becomes that apart from the most enterprising companies, people don't care to explore too much because it's not possible. So I've been part of design teams before where it's people mostly rely on experiential knowledge, and everybody aims to get more knowledge of products that is available out there in the market, but it's very hard to do it. So when you get a new project, let's say a new hospital building came in, the first thing that comes to mind is what did I use for the last hospital building that I designed in a similar location and similar parameters, and that's where the search begins instead of really putting in the main technical specifications behind what is required for me to select a product, and then searching through a comprehensive database, right? Like we don't have that technology yet, but it's a solvable problem, and that's something that we aim to do.
Wow. Yeah. No, that's it's you mentioned earlier about construction experts and technology experts, and how the crossover has to be like you have to have the collaboration and the crossover, and they have to work together to get to solutions. And this is your business is the prime example of how that has to work, because if you don't know that there's this huge quoting, specking out, problem, or they don't even know it's a problem because this is the way we do it. Like this is just, I don't know, there is no other way to do it. But if you don't get those construction people with the technology people, this never births into a reality.
Yeah, there is I would say Pratyush was kind of touching on, I would say, some interesting dynamics, right, in the industry, because there's always the question of like, why now? Like, why does this technology make sense now? And I think part of it is that the sort of on the AI side, like the capabilities are existing, but I would say it's worth noting some changes to, definitely the lighting and electrical market, and I think it also affects other product categories in construction, which I would say there's a few trends, right? One is the number of products and the number of manufacturers is increasing exponentially, right, over, say the past decade, right? Particularly for lighting with LED technology, it's just made it, there's so many different products available, right? And then, supply chains are becoming more complex and more global. So things like changes in pricing or lead time are becoming much more frequent, right? And so you compound those two factors of, many more products in market, much more dynamic, sort of changing to that information. And suddenly, like conventional methods of like, I'm just going to study the catalog, or, I've done this for 10 years. And so I know what's in the market. Like it starts to become intractable, like for a human, even an experienced expert in the industry, just to keep track of like what's available and how the market is changing and to keep their customer up to date. And I think that those dynamics are like very real in the industry today. So there's sort of like this imperative to do something different, right? Because the market is changing underneath the experts in the industry. And so, they're sort of actively looking for, hey, we need to change the way we're doing business. Like we're not able to offer the level of service that our customers expect, right? Or what's going to be required to make us a leader in the market.
So go ahead, Justin.
Oh man, we're going back and forth. You'd mentioned AI, obviously having vast experience in this prior to, 6 months ago when everyone learned that ChatGPT was a thing. We see this growing, and obviously as us as a technology company, we see, we see the vision of like, oh yeah, this is going to make past technology growth look silly. Like it's going to explode. It's going to work so fast that we're going to, going from the internet and like how quickly that changed our lives. It's like, yeah, this is gonna make that look not like nothing. Like it's gonna be like a blink of the eye. Where do you see essentially accessibility to AI now for businesses? So obviously you're building a product that is utilizing that. In the construction space, who's far behind, just kind of across the board, like, do you see it as in this is going to help the small business? This is just going to make the enterprise level just way more dominant, or maybe the middle market? Where's your kind of vision on how AI is going to really impact construction?
I mean, I think AI is going to fundamentally change every business, not just construction.
Agreed.
I mean, I think, the large language models that we've seen are at a consumer level, right? I mean, they're accessible to any of us. Most of us have tried those models. I think as it affects our business, we have to be very conscious of, at a super general sense, like make versus buy, right? Like there's big players in this market. They're developing incredible, I would say, generalist technology, right? And, Parspec would never compete with, one of the several large players that are building large language models, right? So knowing when we can leverage that technology that's sort of fast moving and when we need to develop our own, right? So this isn't directly answering your question of like, how is the sort of like industry going to benefit? I think that to me, that's like, it's going to be ubiquitous, right? It, as a technology business using AI, it has forced us to think very carefully about, what do we really need to build from scratch? What is our competitive advantage? How hard is it going to be for others to enter into this market? And I can talk a little bit more about my philosophy there, specific to that business, but I think that's how it's affecting us, I would say.
Yeah, and again on top of it, so smaller companies, we've seen that the processes are more or less, I mean, fundamentally the same. They're different in certain aspects because of the scale, but even in small companies, people are still looking out for. There's a phase when they're looking out for products and putting quotes together and comparing quotes from different reps and putting a final version of the bid document together. That fundamentally happens in large companies as well. So there's not too much of a difference between how the application of AI for a particular process in the supply chain would differ too much between the large and small companies. Yeah, so that's one point. And the other one is, in general, how it would affect the construction industry is that I think it would bring the practitioners, the stakeholders closer to the actual decisions that they have to make to ensure that their businesses are thriving, rather than spend a lot of time doing redundant and manual work that automation can clearly handle, right? Like one thing is having the accessibility to a comprehensive product database and the ability to compare all products in that database from using a particular given parameters. Like if I wanted to just quickly do a search of bring me all chandeliers that are black in color, have 5 bulbs of 1,000 lumens and above. There's no way to do that right now. And
Not yet is that's
okay.
the right term, right?
Yeah, and AI can provide them, right? Like, and then the final decision of which product is best suited for my project, that's the most critical, right? Like for a company, because that affects their ongoing business and the quality of the bid documents that they can put together, and that also informs what future businesses they can get, the success of this particular business. So AI can help there, right? Like another example is people spend a lot of time right now in just going through really cumbersome large blueprint documents that are 100 pages and above easily in PDFs, right? Like, and I've seen people literally take printouts and have a lens on their working table and go through their document and figure out some part numbers using a lens. So we are obviously ahead of that.
Yeah.
Right? So let's solve that problem, right? Like AI can solve it and then bring out the information that people need so that then they can act intelligently on it.
Hey everybody, Justin here. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. As you know, Will and I are business nerds and love talking to leaders who've scaled their businesses using people, process, and technology. If that's something that gets you all jazzed up too, then do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to hit the little bell so you get notified every time we drop a sweet new episode. And if you know somebody who'd be an awesome guest on the show, send them our way. Just go to buildandscale.net/guest. Now, back to the episode.
You're solving a time issue that some people know, because the coding process, it can sort of kill them in the amount of time that's being spent. Especially, there's one other piece that you're addressing, which is the issues around the specs that are needed for submittal versus human error, right? And that happens too. This is why litigation happens in the industry. One of the 1,000 reasons that litigation happens in the industry. Do you feel that by essentially you're simplifying the process, right, where you're now able to just put in a few keywords and it'll spit back out kind of the things that you're looking for, or a selection, reduces your selection and it makes it a lot easier to find, right? So would that be fair to say?
Yes.
So, and the industry has been very resistant in using technologies that just in general, right? Is that also fair to say?
Yeah, I would say that in general, right, it's been harder to get adoption, right, within construction. There's several reasons for that, but true statement. Yeah.
The companies that you are talking to that are successful with this, how is their mindset different from the ones that maybe are behind?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are tailwinds, right, which we discussed earlier, which is that the market is changing, right? And so customers are there's an imperative to act, right? Because the existing processes are no longer serving the customer, right? And so I think that helps. Of course, you still have an adoption curve, right, in any industry. And I think from a strategic point of view, as a startup, it's identifying those customers, right, that are looking for a solution. And if you're asking like what the characteristics of those customers are, I think we're still like largely educating. So we're still like, we're making the first contact with these customers. So obviously anyone that's coming to us, like I would say in general, right, is looking for a different way of doing things. But I would say that the leadership there typically has a plan of like certain improvements that they want to make, right? And they're not typically biased about like how they go about achieving those improvements, right? And so I would say like a characteristic is you're just open-minded to different ways of solving the problem, which I mean sounds very simple, right? But I think a lot of it's very easy as a leader to feel like you know what the solution is, right? And you're kind of like marching along a plan, and then yeah, so you wouldn't be open to like entertaining these new ideas, and so new companies to market, we're one of them, right? And so there's an open-mindedness to just hear like what we're doing and how that might help them. And so first is just like listening to the solution, and then if it makes sense to them, they actually have like a very well-defined idea of how to drive adoption within the company, right? Because for submittals and quoting, especially for larger companies, we're talking about work that hundreds of people are doing, right? Hundreds of people are going to be using the application within their company. And so if you're not experienced or thoughtful about managing that deployment, then it's obviously harder to succeed, right? And so obviously we're there to help and support that, but I would say those are the characteristics, right? They're looking, they have business problems that they want to solve. They're open-minded as to the solution, so they give us a chance to explain what we're doing, and then they put a plan in place, right, to ensure that everybody is leveraging that technology once we've proven the value there.
So would you also say these leaders, are they fearful, the ones that are looking to adopt technology like yours? Are they more or less fearful of like outcomes? Like are they, because they're always looking for an outcome, and the industry has been burned by technology, which is interesting. It's the reason why they're also behind on technology, right? In implementing technologies is because of that they've been burned, and so they're staying away from it. Would you say that?
Oh, go ahead. I'll let you finish.
Would you say that the leaders that are kind of being more innovative, are they fearful also, or no?
Yeah, I mean, I think any leader is nervous about like two things when adopting new technology, right? It's like, is it going to deliver the value that I think it will deliver, right? And then like, is my team going to use it? And I think we've tried to, and we've done a couple of things to make that easier, right? So I think yes, they're fearful. I think any good leader is nervous about those things. The first is like we offer a free trial, right? So during that period, customers should be able to like validate the value prop. Like, are we actually able to, save somebody time in making a submittal or produce a higher quality submittal? And the second is like, once the value is there, like, is the team going to use it? And so I think our pricing model also is geared towards making that easier, which is a usage-based model, right? So if you're nervous about usage, like you're paying based on the usage and therefore the value that your customers succeed, and so that makes it easier, right? They don't have to buy a bunch of seats not knowing if customers are going to use it. That still doesn't take away all the risk, right? But we've tried to make it sort of less risky for that decision maker by implementing those two things.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that Forrest touched on, that the pricing of the product and just the value offering of the product in itself, as well as the product design, like they all combine towards right solving that fear of the outcome, right? Like if it's not too much of a leap from what people are currently trained to do at an office, from what they're using to going to a different software, it makes it easier to try things out. And if they don't work for you, then it also should be easy to offboard right from it. So it works well for isolated solutions, which is what we are focusing on right now. Would be interesting to see how when we move towards more integrated solutions, how that evolves, right? One of the things that you touched on earlier about Forrest said that there are many reasons why companies in construction don't adopt software, or not that they don't, but there's a certain hesitation or more inertia. There are many reasons, right? Like one of the reasons that I have observed is just the fragmented application, or the substitute of that software, the solutions that form that substitute, they are very fragmented, right? Like for coding, let's say, like some people are just doing it on Excel files. And on the other extreme, some offices have developed their own proprietary solutions that help them with doing that particular kind of a job that they used to do that better. So we have a huge spectrum, right? Like it's not that there are just two or three other solutions and that's exactly how each solution works. So to design a software product that person A from the other end of the spectrum feels easy to onboard to at the same level as person B from the other end of the spectrum becomes a product design challenge. And if you do that well, then it makes it easier to sell the product and also have people adopt it. Because at the end of the day, if there's a solution that saves people time, they'll go for it, right? Mm-hmm. Like you just have to ensure that all the surrounding factors because of which they haven't done it before, they are taken care of.
So, well, there's also a phenomenon that I think is worth mentioning here, like that I think rarely happens with technology, but it does happen. It's, more of like a leapfrogging, right? Which is, and I think AI like offers that like opportunity, right? Which is one of the reasons people don't adopt technology, right? Is because it's difficult to use, right? So there may be features where, there's an advantage to doing like advanced product search, right? But it takes a bunch of effort, right, to structure your data in that way. And so because of that, all but the largest customers may not be willing to put in that effort, right, to have like their own structured database. Well, then you get a disruptive technology like AI that can do that automatically. And now that's just instantly available with no effort, right? And so I think that's part of what could happen here and in general with AI technologies in construction, which is because AI, I would say generally is like really capable, easily to understand natural language and natural speak. So you can formulate a query about a product in natural language and the system knows what to look for, right? And so that's very natural to people versus having to formulate like something that a computer can understand. And so I think we're going to start to see those type of technologies where it's just made much more accessible to the audience. There's less time to train or less time to set up these systems to leverage it. And ultimately that's going to, I think drive much adoption much more easily, right? And so I think AI could present that to industries like construction that, maybe, didn't fully adopt, e-commerce because of some of these challenges, right? And now it's suddenly easier and you see that type of adoption and they never went to those traditional systems, right? Just straight to an AI enabled system.
That's a leap. That's definitely a leapfrog. That's the definition right there.
Yeah.
That's a super frog. That's not.
So have any cybersecurity concerns ever been brought up by the industry in trying to, let's say, use your platform?
Yes. This data, depending on the data, can be very sensitive. So in particular, the product technical spec may be less sensitive, but the product, say pricing, for example, is. And so, customers are interested in, who has access to this data? What are we doing to protect this information for our customers? And Pratyus, you're probably best qualified to answer that, but the short answer is absolutely. As administration, security is very important, and why Pratyus is getting set up here. I mean, I think I'll talk just briefly about the security, right? So we have a cloud-based system. We're using like the latest security requirements, which are SOC 2 compliance, but it is interesting to note that I think some customers are still nervous about whether the cloud like is secure today, right? And so some, had previously been using on-premise systems, and so we are educating them, right, that they can have the same level of security using our system as they would with an on-prem server storing that information.
I mean, the question we always ask when anyone says the cloud secure versus, our on-premise site, can a person throw a brick through the window of your site of work? If they can, it's kind of similar, right? It's just there's a level of security and other processes are around it. So anything can be secure or unsecure. It's just, is there a process around it? Can someone, let's say, audit it or verify it? And SOC 2 is a great compliance to have an audit trail behind. So it's great that you're doing that. Awesome.
And I think more generally, right, other than the security compliance, which I say is like table stakes, right? I think it's being very clear with your customer on how you're utilizing the data, right? I mean, people have, just from the consumer world, people they have that experience, right, of other companies that have used data in ways that they didn't expect or maybe they weren't comfortable with. And so now it is a question that we get often, right? Customers expect to know exactly how their information is being used. And so we've just taken the stance of being very upfront. And, for people that are curious about that, we use it to improve our own algorithms and to provide better recommendations, right? But like, we're not sharing that information with any third party, and we're not sharing data in a way that could identify any particular customer or any particular supplier, right? It's anonymized in that way.
Yeah, I mean, cybersecurity just really comes down to choice and priority, right? Like for a company, it's a solved problem. Even if everything is hosted on a cloud, it still can be. It's very secure at the end of the day, especially if you're relying on the large and the proven cloud providers like Amazon and Google. It just comes down to, as a company, how you plan to prioritize it, right? Like if that is something that as a company you're working on, then the customers know that they're in good hands, right? Like it's not like there's a technological block that we don't know how to keep data secure. So that, knowing that, it helps us being more confident in portraying to our customers that the data is in good hands.
So obviously, cybersecurity is important, especially for those that are more frontlining on the innovative side that are looking at your technology. They are looking also at cybersecurity hand in hand with improving. So they're not sacrificing one over the other. They're looking at both when looking at your technology. So that kind of says something about the mindset and profile of, the construction industry, sort of the innovators, the ones that are far, ahead of the curve, and the ones that are probably going to make the most money because of how competitive it will make them. It's interesting to just point out that fact that that's where their mindset is versus how is cybersecurity going to cost me more money, right? They're looking at it as a competitive advantage. So I just wanted to point that out because I've heard this multiple times in different ways in the industry. So this is a great way to, way to show that.
Absolutely true. And I mean, I don't have the experience to know what this was like even 5 years ago, but I will say, like today, as I mentioned, it's table stakes, right? Like literally every enterprise customer that we've had in the early stages has requested details here, right, around exactly how the data is being used and what we're doing to secure it. I think 5 to 10 years ago, I'm not sure we would have seen the same level of interest like very early on in conversations with customers around that. But I don't have that firsthand experience to know if that's changed, but it feels different to me in the last few years.
Very interesting.
For sure. 5 years ago, talking about cybersecurity to a general contractor or anybody, it was kind of like, yeah, it's a thing. We know it exists. There's bad guys. We're okay with it. But today it's like, shit, my insurance premiums went up for cyber insurance, like significantly. So now I'm going to start paying attention. Or, yeah, there's just too much news of, people being hacked, pipelines being hacked, like government agencies being hacked, that like, I have to get this under wraps. So especially when you get into a larger enterprise client. They're like, the risk is just too high. Like to not have somebody that's overseeing that and checking and making sure that that's all buttoned up. It just starts becoming like this is just me not wanting to run this business anymore, because it becomes very inevitable if you don't have control of your data. Yeah, it's been great talking to both of you, but we've got one last question for you that we love dearly. So each of you individually, if you go back 20 years, that's 2003, what would you tell yourself? What advice would you give your younger self 20 years ago?
Should I start, Pratyush?
Yeah, please go for it. Yeah.
Wow, so many things. Thinking back to my mind state at that time related to, I guess, career. I think to not be afraid to try something new, right? I think like coming out of university, for me, coming from like a middle class background, I had this thing of like needing the steady job, right, and being just being reluctant, right, to take a big risk and to try a new idea, and basically afraid of failing. I mean, it just took me, many years of being in that career to know that like those are the projects that I really love, and also to know that like if something doesn't work out, there are other opportunities down the road, right? And so that would definitely be, what I would tell myself. I kind of, wish I had, kind of had the guts to try to build a company earlier in my career, but definitely glad I'm getting that opportunity now.
Yeah.
What about you, Pratyush?
Yeah, it's a good one. Well, I was in seventh grade at the time, so not too much. From a career perspective, actually, well, there are many things, of course, right? Like, but from a career perspective, I would say I would tell myself just to be a little bit more self-critical and not be afraid of taking hard decisions earlier, instead of being more hopeful and seeing how things play out, having the ability to rip the band-aid off in many situations. I think if I was better at that, and that's something I'm striving to be better at even right now, but something I feel like 20 years back, if I told myself, would help a little bit more.
Yeah, that's good advice for a 13-year-old self, I suppose. You might be the youngest person that we've interviewed on the podcast. So there's that win for you. Look at you. You're already famous. So if anybody wanted to get in contact with either you or Parspec, what's the best way they can do that?
They can go through our website if they're interested in learning more, or contacting the team. And, I'd be quite willing to share our personal details. I won't speak to Pratyush, my personal details, like with this podcast. I encourage people to, just contact myself directly if you just want to reach out. And Pratyush, are you comfortable sharing that information as well?
Absolutely, I am. Yeah. I'm also present on LinkedIn and pretty responsive there. So would love to connect with anyone who's interested.
Okay, great. I will throw your details in the show notes there, as well with all the Parspec stuff. Is there anything else you'd like to tell the people before we say adios?
I just want to give Will, you and Justin, like a great shout out. It's been great getting to know you guys a little bit and chatting here, and we look forward to helping to make sure this gets the audience it deserves. So thanks a lot.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Both have been amazing, and we're excited to release your episode. Yeah, to all of our listeners, that's all for today. And until next time, adios.
Adios.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Building Scale. To help us reach even more people, please share this episode with a friend, a colleague, or on social media.
Remember, the 3 pillars of scaling a business are people, process, and technology.
And our mission is to help the AEC industry protect itself by making technology easy.
So if you think your company's technology pillar could use some improvement, book a call with us to see how we can help maximize your IT and cybersecurity strategy. Just go to buildingscale.net/help.
And until next time,
keep building scale.
Scale.